Today, we're talking about a country that has been back in Eurovision for about 5 minutes. Despite that, it's already sent an entry, withdrawn it again amid a storm of controversy, had the creative director of the national selection that chose it resign in protest, and then send someone else instead. That was all inside the space of a week. That country is Montenegro, and while they have eventually managed to untie the knots that they tied themselves in and fire the starting gun on Eurovision 2025, it's been chaotic enough that this story merits a video of its own. Quickly before we get into it, as always, if you enjoy the video, make sure to like it. You can subscribe to the channel as well. My socials and the socials of my editor Jay are in the description, and there are details on how to support us financially as well if you want to do so. As always, we really appreciate all of your support. Now that's out the way, let's go through how Montenegro's selection for Eurovision this year went from uneventful to bizarre in fairly short order. This is actually Montenegro's first year back after a few years away. They participated as a one-off in 2022, and before that they hadn't participated since 2019. I don't blame them either for dropping out after 2019, because anyone would have been traumatized by just how awful their effort was that year. I'm in heaven. Luckily, things have sort of improved in the time that they've spent outside of the contest since then. Once the decision was made for them to return, they made a lot more effort about it than a lot of people expected them to. That meant a full 16-song national selection to decide who their entry would be. Given that this is a country of 600,000 people, that's pretty ambitious. While they deserve credit for managing to pull it together, the fact that it's such a small country might have had something to do with the fact that they only had 32 valid songs submitted for consideration. That means half of those ended up in the shows at the end of it. To put this into context, Montenegro has the same population, roughly speaking, as Malta. They had 36 songs that actually made it to their selection, not submissions, actual songs that made it through. We can presume that they got a lot more submissions than that. Iceland has half the population of Montenegro, and even they had 118 submissions. The flip side of this is that these countries are naturally more established in the contest. It's a lot easier to convince artists to participate in a show that's established. Regardless of that though, it makes it a lot harder to put out a full set of passable quality songs. The other thing with a country this size is that there aren't that many artists in total. That's evidenced by the fact that most of the artists in this selection had worked with at least one other artist in it on at least one occasion. In any case, they did manage to pull something together, even if it was a little odd. They even flew former Eurovision winner Emily de Forest in to be part of their jury. She remains the only Eurovision winner to have ever sung to me in a Finnish sauna. How many times do we win in this? How many times do we break the news between us? Only teardrops. You also had Tijana Bogacevic from 2017 in there. Then you had Daniel Popovic, who once narrowly avoided prison for not paying child support to his ex-wife. We then opened the show with 40 minutes of assorted histories and stories and introductions without a single song being performed. This is maybe a trick I would not recommend that the producers repeat next year. When the songs finally came, they were of a decidedly mixed quality. This is pretty much what you'd expect when you had so few options to choose from. As you'd expect, there were some questionable choreo choices, as well as some absolute bottom-of-the-barrel disaster bops. That one in particular may have been a complete and utter disaster, but Eurovision would not be the same without these kinds of songs showing up in the selections, and we're all better off for it. What I love about this as well is that the artist here, Dolce Herrera, was one of the most prominent artists in this selection. And also interestingly, apparently Montenegro's first ever professional drummer. All of this just makes the complete mess that was that performance make even less sense than it did in the first place. Other than that, at the time, things seemed to be proceeding in a fairly standard fever dream style way that Eurovision tends to. That goes right down to the aforementioned Tijana Bogacevic accidentally giving their 8 points in the jury vote to that disaster bop we just listened to, and then not being able to change who she voted for after the fact. She even announced on TV that she had already realized she had made a mistake. In any case, we did finish the show with a winner, and while things went downhill pretty fast after that, I'm going to talk about that song before I tell you how. That song was Clickbait, and it was sung by the band NeonoeN. 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 Bez sam rozpołożę This band was actually called NeonoeN until 2023. Ironically, they changed their name so it would appear higher up in search engines. These guys were last in the odds to win this show before it aired, and you could get prices as long as 80-1 on them winning. While the odds in question were based on a pretty light amount of information, it's honestly easy to understand why when you listen to this song. While there is admittedly some element of it that I do find catchy, and I find myself occasionally hearing the song over and over again in my head, the production quality of this is really amateurish. To be honest, this kind of thing encapsulates all of my worst fears about Montenegro coming back to the contest. It made me think back to that D-Mol horror show from 2019. Overall, this is a slapdash piece of dad rock, and not a very good one at that. This naturally would lead you to question how it won the selection by coming both second with the public and with the juries. We can answer some of that question with the fact that only a few thousand televotes were cast in total. This means that for the 10 points that for the 10 points that they received, they only received a total of 443 votes. At that level, I'd honestly question the logic of running a public vote at all, because it's clearly so easy to influence the vote in one song's favor. A decently coordinated campaign in even one town or even one neighborhood could successfully catapult you way up the leaderboard. Even having a group of 6 people over being a solo artist is a big benefit here. If we assume that each person in the band has 10 family and friends who will vote for them no matter what, that's already 60 votes in the bag and 50 more than a solo artist. 50 votes is bigger than the difference between 11th and 7th in this selection, or between getting nothing from the public and 4 points. What I'm trying to get at here is that we can kind of write off the weird televote results. The reason is that we're essentially operating in the zone of, well, if you have enough friends, you're going to get some points. And it's low enough that essentially random noise could push you up or down 2 or 3 places. As for the jury vote, that is the real mystery to me. There were better rock songs in the selection than this, and in fact, one of them won the televote. That was Dva Srca by Barjak. That then got firebombed by the jury, and it only came 8th with them. I would absolutely love to know what it was about Barjak that Emily de Forest thought deserved 0 points, while Clickbait got a maximum of 12.
My 12 points goes to song number 10, Neon Clickbait.
In any case, Clickbait ended up winning the selection. This felt like a complete disaster at the time, but I guess both luckily and unluckily for Montenegro, things are about to fall apart. The reason I say luckily is they fell apart in a way that will actually give them a better chance at the contest. Shortly after the victory was confirmed, it emerged that the band had played a version of the song at a festival in 2023. You can't send a song to Eurovision that has been performed publicly or released in any way before September the 1st in the year before the contest. That means for 2025, only songs released after the 1st of September 2024 are eligible. What gave them away here was a short clip of the song, which was discoverable on the festival's Instagram account. And in response, the Montenegrin broadcaster announced that they would investigate. The thing to note here is that at this point, people didn't pay this much heed. This has happened several times before. It happened with Aiko last year, with Riley the year before that. And looking back, it happened to 1944 by Jamala in 2016. And that not only was allowed to compete, it won the whole contest. As a result, most people probably expected the same resolution would be reached with Clickbait, and we would see it at the contest. The band defended the song as well, saying it was clear that they hadn't gained a competitive advantage. This was because the song hadn't been released at the time, and also that there just weren't that many people at that festival. Because of this, it didn't really seem much different to Aiko playing Pedestal to 4 people in a park in the middle of 2023. They also passive-aggressively reposted the statement that the EBU made regarding 1944 on Instagram, where they defended its participation on the basis that the song had only been played to a few hundred people in an early form at a small concert. It was at this point that they also received the support of the one and only Loco Boombox. To the right, dos, tres, cuatro, salta. In the end, though, after this investigation dragged on for several days, the band chose to voluntarily withdraw from consideration for Eurovision. Presumably, they figured out that given how long it had lasted, the writing was probably on the wall. To their credit, they did call on their fans to support whoever the new entrant would be, and they have since appeared on TV with the new entrant to support them. The broadcaster at that point would presumably have been hoping to pick a new entrant and be done with it. Unfortunately for them, there were more bombshells coming before they could get to that. The creative director of the national selection, Vladana Vucinic, who herself participated at Eurovision in 2022, resigned from her position, stating on Instagram that she felt a moral obligation to do so. She also raised questions about how the show was financed and whether anyone had been paid special fees for their involvement, pointedly stating that when things are done transparently, there is no need to keep quiet about them. She was so mad about how things had panned out to do with the selection that she didn't just resign from her creative director position. She completely cut off all involvement with the broadcaster whatsoever. At this point, things had gotten pretty messy. The rumor going around was that after all of this fanfare about their return, Montenegro might just not bother sending an entry. Given how the first and only edition of their selection was now mired in controversy, as well as totally rudderless, having lost their creative director, whose parting shot was to suggest that things hadn't been conducted in a transparent fashion, the idea of them withdrawing didn't seem totally implausible. Luckily, the broadcaster chose another route. That was to send the runner-up of the selection instead. That was Nina Žižić with her song Dobro došli. It says a lot about how chaotically we got to this point, given that this is about 1,700 words into the script of this video, and this is the first time I have mentioned the actual Eurovision entrants. Luckily, despite giving a masterclass in how not to select a Eurovision entry, hence the name of this video, what they've ended up with is actually pretty good. Because of that, the ending of this story is going to be a lot better, I hope, than what has come so far. It is important, though, to familiarize ourselves with Nina because she has involvement at Eurovision before. Once we've done that, we're going to talk about the song she's taking to Basel this May. The funny thing is that her history with Eurovision involves NeonoeN as well. Both the lead singer of that band and Nina tried and failed to represent Serbia and Montenegro when they were still one country in 2004. After that, Nina did make it to the contest in 2013, but only as an uncredited vocalist. That was alongside everyone's favorite rapping astronauts and one of the most robbed entries of all time, Who See. After a few more years in the industry, she then took a 7-year hiatus. Incidentally, she ended that by featuring on a song with Disaster Bop Girlie from earlier. Because of this history, it was Nina's name that immediately caught everyone's eye when the artists were released for this selection. Given that she helped provide one of Montenegro's most iconic previous entries into the contest, but doing so totally uncredited, it immediately felt to a lot of people that there would be a certain poetry to her representing the country this year. As for the song, it's very much along the lines of things that Montenegro has sent to the contest before. They have form for the kind of stereotypical Balkan ballad that this falls under. In fact, their two best performing entries of all time in 2014 and 2015 would come under that category. The immediate concern there would be that this isn't some new ground for the contest. This is something we've seen before, and because of that, the bar is much, much higher. At the same time, I'm actually pretty optimistic about how this song is going to do at Eurovision, and there's a few reasons for that. The obvious part of this is Nina's vocals. A vocally flawless performance is essentially non-negotiable for a Balkan ballad in this style. Luckily, that does not look like it's going to be a problem here. Nina was right on the money in her performance at the national selection. That's in an environment with much worse production than the actual contest. If she delivers the vocal performance at Eurovision in the exact same way she did at Montesong, that is a good part of her job already done and dusted. Thinking back to 2013 as well, it's quite nice to see her give such a different side of her vocals to what Eurovision fans have seen before. The second thing that makes me really optimistic about this song is placing it in the context of the contest this year. This song will be going into a semi-final where it is likely it will have at least one, if not two or three, of Serbia, Croatia, and Slovenia. All of these countries are likely to give a song like this a high number of points. Last year, those three countries were all in a semi-final together, and they traded 12s and 10s. If we work from the assumption that you need the same number of points to get to the final as 10th placed last year, you're looking for 47 points in total. If 2 of those countries give you 10 points, you only need to find 27 from the 16 remaining sets of votes to make it to the final. As Serbia and Slovenia proved when they finished 9th and 10th in that semi, that is more than possible. This is especially true now, given that you generally only have 14 or 15 songs in each semi-final, and every country is giving points to 10 of them. Because of that, I actually think we have a really serious chance of seeing Montenegro in the final of the contest for only the 3rd time in its history. Just quickly, before anyone moans about political voting here, it's absolutely no surprise at all that Serbians or Croatians or Slovenians are going to favour songs that are in a language that they can understand. Montenegrin is mutually intelligible with all of those languages. Therefore, it's just obvious that they're going to be able to connect with it more than a song that's sung in English. That is just human nature, and no amount of revisions to voting systems or attempts to fix it with pots are ever going to remove that factor. This effect would be even stronger if Bosnia was still in the contest. Unfortunately, their broadcaster is in so much debt that I doubt that's going to happen anytime soon. I made a whole video about that situation, as well as other countries that have quit the contest and why a few weeks ago. Once you're done here, make sure to go and watch that as well. Getting back to the song, despite my optimism, I should say that not everything is rosy. There are stronger examples of this genre in my opinion. I definitely think it would be helpful to use the 5 months they have until the contest to think about revamping it a little bit. We really need to amplify the things that make this work, with a Balkan ballad that is drama, drama, and more drama. Also, vocal acrobatics. I don't mean to suggest the song is bad, because it's not. I actually really like it. In addition to that, it was my favourite in the whole selection by a mile. My main concern, though, is basically what I said at the start. This is a genre where you are likely to have direct competition in the year that you're sending it. In addition to that, it's something that Eurovision viewers are so familiar with that the bar is much higher. They have seen so many examples of this executed perfectly. Therefore, you really can't afford to have anything less than a perfect performance, and the song has to be as strong as possible. I also think the choreo really needs a rethink. These wacky hand movements just feel really unnatural and wooden, and I find them more distracting than anything else, to be honest. This also came up in some of the other songs in the selection, so I wonder whether there's a single choreographer who is behind this. But in any case, it has to go before Eurovision, because this will just look really silly and amateur. I'd much rather have a more stationary Nina expressing her emotions through her voice and through her facial expressions than attempting to direct traffic. The outfit could maybe use a refresh as well. Her dress here is nice, but it's not super distinctive, and the weird face veil thing they do just kind of creates a barrier between the viewer and Nina. Personal connection and first impressions are everything in this contest. For me, this feels like a barrier to that rather than creating a powerful moment. I get the desire to create a dramatic effect when she tears it off, but I just don't think the trade-off is worth it. Given the amount of time we have, I'm pretty optimistic that there are going to be some positive changes made to this entry. Provided they do, I really do think we could be seeing the first Montenegrin finalist at Eurovision in a decade. That would be a really solid result for a first effort in some time in the contest. Provided everyone isn't too traumatized after this year, I also think it would probably mean another national selection and another participation in 2026. For a country that is just returning to the contest, that is honestly the most important outcome of all. With that, we have fired starting gun on Eurovision 2025 on this channel. I'm going to say in advance that I'm not going to be as formulaic this year in terms of how I review each country. I do want to try and cover everyone again, but I really like the opportunity to go a bit more in depth like this. In addition, I'm going to try and be on the ground at more national finals this year in person. The first of those is already confirmed, and that will be Esti Laul in February. There should be some really special guests in that video, so make sure to look out for that one. Other than that, I'm going to keep my cards close to my chest for now. Hopefully there will be lots of really fun surprises for you coming in the next few months. For now, in much shorter order, there is going to be a new video in 7 days. Don't panic about this, but it's not going to be a Eurovision related video. At the same time, it's very much in the same sphere, so if you like this, you'll probably like that one as well. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that, and make sure to like this video too if you enjoyed it. For now, thank you again for all of the support. I really appreciate everyone watching, and I'll see you again in 7 days.